look at another scenario. This is an in-restaurant scenario. We'll take another hypothetical user. This time we'll call her Jane. So Jane has a routine every morning. On the way to work, she drops by her favorite coffee shop, picks up her usual order, and heads off. That's her routine. I think this is very common for a lot of us because we all have routines in some form, especially connected with the buying experience of something. And most probably it's a restaurant. So in this case, as Jane walks into her coffee shop, her phone vibrates to let her know that, okay, she has checked into the coffee shop. Her phone is still in her bag. She doesn't worry about it. She goes straight to her favorite spot, the coffee shop, pulls up the newspaper and starts reading. Her order is being prepared in the background. So automatically the system knows she always picks up the coffee and a bagel. That's her morning routine. No order has been placed and it's being processed right now. She just has to check the latest headlines. And then the barista calls her out by name. She didn't even introduce herself. So how does that happen? Right? The barista calls out her name when her coffee is ready. She's done with the news. She goes, picks up the coffee, and just walks out the door. So this is a very radical experience. Very completely different to what we are used to. But it's also not something that's technically out of reach. Again, I can talk about that as we go. But this scenario can be done. And the beauty of it is it's completely, technology has been completely taken out of the picture, even though it's there in the background. Right? Technology is there in the form of a phone and all these things, but she doesn't have to pick up her phone for any of these activities. She doesn't have to pick up her wallet. She just does her normal daily routine. And the technology facilitates and enables that. So once again, what are the themes here? From the user experience standpoint, there is the automatic ordering based on preferences. There's walletless payment experience. Right? There's no wallet involved. You don't have to pull out your phone. You don't have to pull out your cash. Nothing. And seamless daily routine. And completely personalized. Right? Barista knows you by name and your preferences, and they will give you exactly what you want. From a technical standpoint, once again we see the occurrence of check-ins, beacon technology, and NFC-less payments this time. What you saw earlier was NFC payments, but here it's completely different using the kind of technology you get with PayPal or Square. How many of you know about the PayPal beacon and payment technology that was recently rolled out? How many of you know that? Everyone from the inside? Anybody else? Okay. So it's a very interesting technology, right? I'll talk about a little bit in detail. So what it allows you to do is it's completely disconnected from technology. And you only need to know who you are in order to process a payment. But before I get to that, I want to show you some of the technical aspects so that you know what kind of technology is being used in the background to enable that. So once I get to that point, I will visit the whole PayPal beacon technology. As I said, technology just gets out of the way. Let's look at it from a mobile banking experience. How is it being transformed? I'm going to play a small video now.
Customers can speed the process of getting cash by requesting funds from their phone. Customers use their bank's branded app to securely reserve a cash withdrawal. Customers can locate an ATM and request a cash withdrawal, all in the privacy of their own phone in seconds. Using cloud technology to protect customer information, card information is not stored on the phone. Authentication occurs securely within the application. Customers are protected from the risk of card skimming. Customers select Mobile Cash Access. scan the QR code on screen, grab their cash, and go. An electronic transaction receipt is instantly delivered to their phone, all without the need for a plastic card.
I apologize for that, but in case you follow the entire scenario, the theme, what you saw was a situation where the user actually did not have to visit an ATM, put in her card, and enter her details to actually take the money out. She can pre-stage all that, do all that work, from home or wherever they are, giving security benefits. For one thing, you don't have to carry a card now, and you're not vulnerable to card skimming attacks that are very common at ATMs. So, and also you have a unified wallet experience. So you use your wallet for payment at stores, at retailers like you normally do, plus you can also use it for these type of payments. So it's a different way of thinking. And the solution here demonstrated is by a vendor called Paydiot, who built this innovative idea. Now, obviously, this is not, cannot be done in isolation because you have to have tie-ups with ATM manufacturers and financial networks in order to make all this happen. But the end result is a completely different experience to what you have. So an opportunity that we have is to actually build these type of solutions that challenge the status quo to some extent, and to be able to redefine how you do this. And this assume in this particular case, what if the user was using a Google Glass as opposed to having the phone? So in that case, you could do all the work without even having to use your phone. You could use voice for actually doing the instructions, to pre-stage the cash. And then once you go to the ATM, you can use the camera of the device to automatically scan the QR code. So the experience is one where you express the need to get some cash, you walk over to an ATM and you just get the cash, right? So it's been optimized to some extent. And then of course things like less time spent in queue, and also looking at the ATM as an extension of your wallet. And in this case, you have things like geolocation. You need to know where the nearest ATM is, or the ATM from which you want to get the cash from. And you have to do this at participating ATMs, and ATMs which know how to work with this infrastructure. And in the case of Paydiot, they've partnered with Daibo, who makes ATM machines, so to kind of make this end-to-end scenario possible. And as they roll out, it's going to get more adoption and much more attractive. Then of course you have QR codes for capturing state, and a cloud-based wallet, a secure wallet that is on the cloud, and then of course integration with banking and payment systems like Visa and all these other systems that allow them to do the financial transactions needed and to pre-stage the cash on the ATMs. So, what are some of the common themes across all these scenarios? I want to approach this session by looking at these scenarios and then see what are the common themes so that we can imagine the type of things we need to look into in the coming year. Right? So that's the approach I want to take. So one thing I see a lot is micro-location. Right? Micro-location services. Users being able to check into establishments, and being able, and retailers for being able to fence users at very minute or micro locations within the establishment. This is all different to the whole GPS where you're talking at a much larger scale. You're talking that even within this room, I could have different spots which are of concern, which I can use to drive the user experience. Think a scenario where you're at a museum and you walk over to a painting, and your museum map, which knows where all the locations are, automatically pops up and gives you the background and all the other things about that painting. It's a lot more lot better experience when information is pushed to you based on your context, which is more relevant. And you don't have to keep looking for the data. So you can think of a lot of scenarios like that, that with this whole micro-efficient technology, you can dramatically enhance. And then there's the whole mobile wallets and payments. Now this has been there for a while, this whole mobile wallet. When will NFC finally take off, and when can we start paying with our mobile phones? There's been a lot of challenges around that, and I will get into some of those things later. But I think we are at a point where with some of these technologies actually coming, making the full circle, joining the dots to actually make this feasible to some extent. I talked about the PayPal beacon. I think that is one technology that is really promising. That maybe would be able to really solve this problem that we are having right now with mobile wallets. And because part of the problem with mobile wallets is the current experience is not dramatically better than what you have, right? You swipe instead of swiping your card. If you still have to take your wallet phone out and tap it on the terminal, it's still not a whole lot different. The experience is still pretty much the same, which is probably partly why it's not taken off. But I think it's probably going to change. And from a personalization standpoint, this has been there for a long time. Personalization is an old problem. But I think with all this data that we're capturing nowadays from all these different channels, we have a lot more opportunity to harness that data to really personalize the user's experience. And building a proper platform where that personalization really works is sometimes not easy. You have vendors who provide you products that do that, but if you get this right, then businesses can really expect to see their businesses taking off, because now you're able to give very relevant contextual releasements to users with a much better likelihood of conversion. Right. So now I get into this next stage of my presentation, which is talking about the opportunities and challenges. The technology landscape, as you probably all know, this is more of a developer-oriented session, so I think you all know that technology is evolving very fast. And so this scenario here, in 1995, people were questioning, why do I need a website? But in 2000, it was silly to question why you need a website. You've got to have a website. And everybody did, mostly. And in 2005, why do you need a mobile app, right? There was no iOS. I think there was Android, but it's not really taken off. Right? This is Android, the company, before it got bought over by Google. And by 2010, it's become mainstream, right? So now it's silly to ask, why do we need a mobile app? It's commonplace. So what's next? TVs, cars, we don't know. Some of these things we don't have a way of predicting. But right now, we are at a stage where mobile is firmly entrenched. From a technology standpoint, there's a proliferation of technologies and players out there. So we are right now at the proliferation stage. That's where we started consolidating. And organizations are really looking at mobile first. They're always saying mobile first. We want to do mobile first. But how do you get there? That's the trick. Because in order to do mobile first, you need APIs, right? So this is where API management and thinking about APIs has dramatically taken off in the recent years. I'll talk about why. Has anybody been exposed to API managers? Anybody exposed to API managers? Apigee, Model, WSO2, API manager. So API managers is what enables you to build omni-channel, future-proof platforms. Because what CIOs and businesses are looking for is a means of looking across all the different channels. They're not focusing on a particular channel it's probably not a good idea, right? So even though this is a mobile forum, right, and there's a whole push for mobile first, I'm really saying, you've got to start thinking about API first, right? Because in order to get to mobile first, you've got to have an API, right? And with APIs comes a whole new set of challenges. And now you're thinking about not just the mobile channel, you're thinking about the web channel, you're thinking about cars, you're thinking about TVs, and all the other channels that you have, kiosks, partners, developers, right? So, an API is what lets you do that, or get there. So you have enterprise core services, you have your brick and mortar stores, you have the stores where people go to physically buy stuff, you got the web. So before this, there was no other channel. It's pretty much it, right? So, but now you have a whole proliferation of channels, right? You've got mobile, you've got phone, you've got kiosks, you've got partners, and as an organization, as a business, you need to look at all these channels, right? How do you do that? You're going to start thinking API, right? So, and customer experience, which goes across. Note when I say in this diagram, I have customer experience going across all the channels. Meaning, we're going to have a unified customer experience across all the different channels. That's what CIOs are looking for. And you have different channels that achieve this objective to some extent, all enabled through a unified API. Right? And when you're building this API, you've got to start thinking business and use case, right? And not mobile only, right? Because then you're focusing on one channel, right? You've got to start thinking about how do I buy your product, right? Or other scenarios, and then enable those APIs and start using them across the channels to actually reap the benefits of this architecture. So why do we need an API? Access to data from different channels, not just the web, we'll talk about that. And companies can redefine their interaction, right? This is also similar to redefining the user experience, because now you have all these other players that you have started interacting with, partners, developers, suppliers, customers, and all of them can impact your top line, right? So by executing a strategy where you think about all these channels and enabling all these parties to work with you and do business with you, it's a huge value proposition. And also you're increasing opportunity and innovation. You're creating whole new markets. And you're increasing your customer base. Because previously you may have blocked out an entire class of revenue or customers because you didn't have, say, a partner, an API that a partner can use. Right? But now you're adding that, so you're opening up those avenues and channels. You're also increasing avenues for monetization. So when you have an API, it doesn't mean that you give it away for free, right? So you can charge for that API use by use, like what we do with other cloud technologies. So partners can use your APIs, drive more business to your company. They also get benefits, and then at the end of the day, you may want to also monetize that use and get more revenue so you can manage your infrastructure and also it affects your top line. You also have excellent development team, because by having an API, for example, where a developer can go up and sign up for, right? You now have developers from around the world working for you, right? And with the monetization scheme, you can actually make this model work, where they benefit, you benefit. If the app takes off, whatever they build on top of your APIs, then it's a win-win situation. And we're starting to see this a lot, and with companies like Mashery offering these APIs, like APIs for TomTom. I'm just thinking about some APIs I have, but so users can use these TomTom APIs that they've exposed through Mashery. Mashery is an API management vendor, to build their own apps that do interesting, funky things, and they can charge for those APIs. TomTom can, and monetize them to recoup the cost. So it's a whole new ecosystem. It's a whole new ecosystem. It's known as the API ecosystem. And so there's a lot of opportunity here. A lot of opportunity for developers to actually start consuming this, as well as building these APIs that other people can use. And then also it future-proofs your business. Using an API is future-proofing your business. Because you may have a channel that you don't anticipate now, right? And then once that comes, it will be very easy for you to expose that particular channel. You're thinking about the channel, you're thinking as a digital platform, as opposed to just a single channel. And liberate the developers. Developers love APIs. And let them do stuff. Sometimes them playing around with your APIs and coming up with cool new ideas will open up avenues of monetization and business that you didn't dream of. So liberate them. So APIs fall into three broad audiences. I think most of what we're talking about was the public one. So open to everyone, anybody can go up and subscribe. You can engage new customers, new external developers, and you have opportunities to monetize. Then you have the partners and associates of your business. And you can expose these APIs to select business partners and clients. Mostly around, the use cases are mostly around integration and providing white label services. But you can also meet and monetize this functional revenue. Then you have the internal APIs. These are APIs for your internal task force engineers to build apps to be consumed for enterprise apps, for example. And this is mostly for productivity enhancements. Like an organization may have an internal API to talk to their leave system, leave management system, for example. And so allow them to access them from the outside. So it's mostly productive. So we have the question, so where does the overlap with SOA come here when we're talking about APIs? So this is here which I got from Apigee, which defines the scope of SOA governance as well as API governance. Where does SOA typically end? Right? It's not fine. It's not like very clear. But where does it end versus where does the API begin? So SOA is mostly focused around enterprise services, whereas APIs are more external facing, right? Facing for the different channels and mobiles and so on. And the types of governance you do is also different, right? So you would govern SOA very differently to how you would govern APIs. You have things like, we talk about APIs, you have things like metering, throttling, and so on, which typically you don't need to worry too much about when you're talking about SOA, right? So it's not really SOA++, meaning next generation of SOA. It's a little different. This further explains what we're talking about. So when we're talking about SOA, we're talking about this layer, which is more security for API backend versus API is for security for active API and enabling developers. So this is kind of drawing a line, a very vague one, and that in terms of where one ends and the other one begins. So APIs, we actually start looking at APIs almost as products. And a successful API program typically has this life cycle. So we start out with a plan. This is more of a business-driven plan. What do I need to provide to my customers? And this is where the product managers come in and assess the need from a business standpoint, work and figure out, okay, here are the APIs that we need to expose. And then comes the design phase, where you decide how is this API going to be exposed to the outside? What does the interface look like, right? And most of the time it's not Wisdom. It's probably a RESTful JSON type of interface, because that's the most best for client consumption. So you define how your REST interface is going to look like. And then build APIs and proxies. I'll do a small demonstration of how you build a small API using Apigee. So then you get to the point where you actually build the APIs. So you can actually build what are known as API proxies, which are a layer of API that proxies connections to your existing enterprise services. Or you could build new APIs from scratch. API proxies is typically the way to go, because if you already have all the services available in-house, which you now just want to expose through a neat mobile interface where you can also do things like throttling and metering and the governance associated with that. So I'll show you how to do an API proxy. And then you're going to engage your developers. You're going to have a developer portal where developers come in and say, I want to subscribe to this API. You give them developer keys. They can put that into a client SDK, which you can provide, and then have them start working with your API. And then the last part is actual consumption of the API from different channels. So supposing an API actually has many challenges. I've grouped them into different categories here. One of them is infrastructural, operational, and integration. From an infrastructure point, security is a big challenge. How do you secure your endpoints? How do you scale it? How do you make sure it's compliant with regulatory regulations like PCI and HIPAA, the regulations that we have at least in the US? And from an operational standpoint, how do you monitor this API? Is it down? And how do you govern it? How do you do change control, version? And then integration. How do you integrate with your existing backend service that you already have? Remediation. What if you want to do something on the fly to transform some existing data before it goes out to the mobile client? Is it possible to do it using an API? That will be possible, so you can do that. And then how do you make sure it meets regulatory requirements? So this is where API management comes in. There's a lot of players right now. It's a fairly young space. It's not very mature. So there's a lot of players that haven't started consolidating yet, like Apigee, as I said, IBM, Wardell, Nashville, WSO2. There's a lot of players that are providing very interesting solutions, and MuleSoft. And you might want to take a look at the Gartner research on the Magic Quadrant for API management if you were interested in something to find out all the different players out there. So as I said, the API manager is not simply proxying requests to the backend. It also does a whole bunch of other things like authentication, analytics, right? Metering, throttling, and remediation. So analytics is where you capture data about your API usage, so you can reduce patterns in the API usage. And metering is if you want to monetize your API, find out how much your APIs have been used. You can use metering techniques to capture those data. And throttling. So this is the layer that you introduce above your enterprise services. You don't want a million requests coming into your API manager. That's going to crash your backend services. If you know how many requests a certain backend services can handle, you can set these throttling limits so that you can manage this infrastructure and the growth. You can do things like that. Now just more demo on how to create an API. Does anybody have any questions on this so far? I'll do a demo. This is a more of a freestyle demo, so pardon me if things don't work. Using a service called Apigee. Can you hear me back? Can you hear me? I'll create a simple demo right now. So essentially, the capabilities it has is, you can create API proxies. You can publish these APIs so that developers can actually access them. You can see analytics on your API usage. You can do various administrative functions. Right? two APIs. So I will create an API proxy here. So you can use you can proxy to an existing backend service, or you can proxy to an existing visitor, or you can create a new Node.js API or an existing one, right? So what I'll do is I will say new Node.js, right? This will show you how a new API looks like. I'll call this greetings. Note it created this path with V1, right? So version 1. So this is the standard that Apache recommends for version APIs. Description. I can secure my APIs with the keys there if I want. That's what I get now. So good. So now it's provisioning the API. Now it's actually in the test environment. Right now it's in test. So this is the URL that I can use to access this API. Right? API test. Let's take a look at the actual API itself. So here's an embedded code that you can use to serve this API. So hello world here. Let's change it from L. Let's save it. Just copy the URL. I use the curl command and just get the URL. It's basically making a GET request to that particular endpoint. There you go. That is the first step. So I provisioned an API that I can use from my mobile telephone. Now, another more interesting scenario is maybe calling an existing API, because this is a very common scenario. Now we want to enable it through this mobile ecosystem, right? So for API proxies, create a new API. We'll talk to an existing backend service. For this, we'll actually use Yahoo where is the Yahoo API is available here. So I created a API called V1 Superweather, right? Which is actually proxying its connections to Yahoo. So I add a resource. It's a little tricky resource. So I'll call it point to that particular resource. So now I have an API here, V1 super weather forecast RSS, which is actually proxy to this one. Now, let's copy this. Here I'm calling my own API. This is just a query parameter is passed to this particular location. There you go. Now I'm getting the data from Yahoo. Right? So I've created an API proxy that talks to Yahoo. Now, what if I want to do some mediation? Now, if most of the time, mobile apps consume JSON. JSON is pretty much the standard when it comes to consuming their services. So, but this is built an RSS. So how do I convert this to JSON? Actually, quite simple. Let me show you how. Go to develop. There is no concept of policies. You can attach policies to your APIs. So here's things like quota. Quota checking to make sure that your API only provides so many number of invocations, right, per user. Spy paralysis to prevent denial of service. Between a certain time period, if you get a number of connections, you can say beyond that don't serve anymore. And runtime rate limit, response caching, then of course you have various XML encryption for security, JSON, then you can do more as well, right? SAML assertions, if you want to integrate with enterprise using SAML, JSON to XML, XML to JSON, and so on. What I'm interested in is this one, XML to JSON. So I select the policy, and then I attach it to the response. I want to do the transformation on the way back. Save it. There you go. Now it's JSON. So immediately it can be consumed from your mobile. So this is just demonstrating some of the possibilities of using this API management. In addition to that, you have this concept of product, right? Now you can create a product, an API product that encompasses multiple of these API processes. You can say weather service next generation version, right? And then they encompass all the API processes that you get along with all the things that you're doing, right? And becomes a product. Then you can say, this product people can subscribe to, right? And you can have a certain number of calls that people can make. So you can define tiers, right? So you can have a certain group of people who are gold tier or bronze tier or silver tier. And you can apply monetization to that and say if you want to get to this tier, then you have to pay so much and so on. And you can build that concept of products here. You can also loop in or enroll developers, right? Developers and applications will get a certain API key that they can use to actually call your API services. So there's a lot you can do with API management in this manner. So how should I design one? So as I said earlier, it should be driven by use cases and what you're trying to do from a business standpoint. And with all the different channels in mind, I mean, you already talked about this. And stick to architecture styles like JSON over REST, which is lightweight and very, very applicable, especially for mobile. And think pragmatic REST, right? So when I say pragmatic, there's a lot of people who are reading Roy Fielding's dissertation on REST, try to follow everything that REST is. What is REST exactly? Almost to the point where they don't want to do anything outside of it. But really, when you're implementing a RESTful API that is usable, is developer friendly, you've got to be pragmatic, not dogmatic, right? And by dogma, I mean sticking to every word that is in the REST dissertation, right? So there's a lot of guidelines. I think Apogee, this particular company I was talking about, has a lot of guidelines and a lot of good material on how to design a good easy to use RESTful API. There are a lot of webinars, you can go there and check for yourself, and a lot of interesting stuff. They really evangelize APIs, and so it's very good to check out. And then security through OAuth. I think that is a very common pattern when it comes to mobile. And then versioning, because one of the reasons people resort to these management tools is because they cannot handle, the current infrastructure, right? And because they've not been following the practices and things like that. And versioning is a very important practice to follow, because without that, it quickly gets out of hand, and changes you do can impact your developers, causing them to get frustrated and move away from your product. So by using those principles early on, you're making sure you're keeping the developers, and as a result, your end users happy. All right, next subject is wallets. So wallets are a very mobile wallets is a huge area that I was talking about earlier. So much happening with respect to this in the last few years. But there's a massive wallet war going on. You probably know with folks like Google as well as ISIS, right? So this whole concept came about, I think, with the advent of NFC. People figured out that we could use this technology to do mobile payment in a very interesting way. And Google is spearheading most of this with their introduction of that hardware and all that. But they've been really stifled by when people, telecom providers, large telecom providers, who got together and formed this platform called ISIS. Right? So when it comes to NFC payment, you really have two alternatives right now. Actually, there's more, but at a high level. Google, the Google payment, you have ISIS. And both of these it's not very consumer friendly. It's very difficult to get consumers on board with these. They've got to jump through a lot of hoops. We've got to talk to their bank, and we talk to their telecom providers, and we have a SIM card which has, which uses the secure element of the SIM card in order to actually make this work. So that has been a primary reason why the adoption has been slow. In addition to that, the infrastructure costs are pretty high for merchants. And NFC adoption, and in the case of US at least, peripheral service most of it as well, the adoption has been very low due to the fact that EMB is not very popular in the US, despite being very popular in Europe. EMB is the card with the chip, right? So US still has the old strategy, the swipe and sign approach, which is old. So they're not really getting on board with the whole EMB technology, but they have a mandate to do that by 2015, right? According to the regulations. And what this means is that along with EMB comes hardware, right, at merchants which supports NFC. Right? So right now the adoption is low because nobody is using EMB. There's only about 300,000 NFC compatible terminals in the US. And but with the push for EMB, all of those older merchants will have to get upgraded to NFC compatible terminals, which would be probably good news for NFC, right? But then there's also startups, right? Startups like Coin, who are looking at this problem in a completely different way, right? Which is what makes things disruptive sometimes, right? Not going with the status quo. So, but I think they have a lot of ground to catch, and I'm not sure if they'll be successful. But people like PayPal and Square, which I'll talk to later, there's interesting technology that can really redefine this whole payment experience. So I got a little ahead of myself. I think I just go for community. And as I said, they are up for adoption by 2015. with this upgrade, comes a liability shift. What I mean by a liability shift is the liability of, maintaining the security would actually be on the merchant if they fail to upgrade immediately. So that is going to spur the adoption even more, right? And then you're going to have a lot more NFC compatible payment locations. And that's probably going to be good news for NFC, but we'll see how it plays out, especially considering Square and PayPal and all the other players. What we're seeing right now is that we are in a wild west when it comes to mobile payments. Right? It's extremely proliferated. Everybody's doing it. There's a lot of hype. Right? There's no standards. There's there's some regulation, but there's too many players. And that is both a bad thing in one sense, but it's also good, meaning there's a lot of innovation. There's a lot of room for us to also go in and do things, right? And payments are a hot area. And merchants are really against working with folks like Google, because they don't want their consumers' habits being released to Google, because they think maybe Google will try to use that data to mine for recommendations and try to monetize it and so on. And that is also causing a problem for the adoption, right? Which is why we are also starting to see merchants coming together to form these coalitions, which is called the Merchant Customer Exchange, to provide an alternative across merchants that's going to work. So, but I've been reading about it. They've not made a whole lot of headway on it. They're quite slow to adopt, so not really sure how that's going to pan out. And we don't know whether they're going to use NFC or not. They may not, right? So really, I don't think there's a whole lot of good news for NFC. So once it's been first in Sri Lanka, right? So I've been doing a little research on PayPass and payments. I don't think there's any location in Sri Lanka that's supposed to get so this is by MasterCard. They provide these terminals with compatible. So PayPass and IC's penetration is near. There's absolutely nothing, right? And IC is obviously not, because they are major telcos like AT&T and Verizon. So, but we are starting to see with Dialog and Mobitel, there's providing very specific solutions around NFC, like the fuel cards and things like that. But nothing all-encompassing, right? Nothing all-encompassing that really could capture the entire experience, which means there's significant opportunity, right, for you to benefit. And there's an early mover advantage, because right now there's not much happening here. And the first folks to actually do this, there's definitely first mover advantage. And the entrepreneurs amongst you probably know. Bulbs go out right now, they actually do this. This is one area to look at. And stored value accounts, the kind that we are seeing with Dialog, Cash, and Mobitel and Cash, that's very popular amongst this region, this entire region, Asian region. Especially because this region, the adoption of credit cards and is not as high as in the developed countries. And what these stored value accounts gives you is, the benefit it gives you is that to do small transactions, money transactions, the cost is actually very less. Because if you go to the bank, the cost of doing transactions is high. So that is almost like a deterrent for the end user to actually use electronic payments like that, other for big transactions. But stored value cards, stored value technology and solutions makes it easy for you to do micro transactions, so you can pay at a local grocery store or top up your mobile and things like that without much of overhead. So I think that is where the most of the value is as far as this region is concerned. But lots of opportunities. Personalization and predictive analytics. So this is where I think there's a lot of, this is the old problem. It's a very old problem, and And it's not an easy problem to solve, but I think when we are looking at personalization, I think people who crack personalization, the code of personalization, stands to get a lot, because the more intelligent your personalization system is capable of giving you a very targeted, very relevant, contextual advertisement, right? The more likelihood that you can convert, create a new customer, right? So it's really technology that is trying to read the minds of people based on their past experience, based on their friends, based on what they've been doing, right? To predict what are you going to do next, right? This is a very interesting area. I think also combining things like machine learning, where for you to be able to mine this data and make those connections and to be able to give those recommendations. And we've got to approach this in a multi-channel context, right? So it's not just web anymore. We've got to think about all the channels. And then you can tie in the whole API manager into this to actually give a unified interface to personalization across all the different channels. So with personalization, context is king or queen. Yeah? So what are the user's behaviors and how does he or she use the app? Right? So how does he use the app? Meaning, how does he navigate through the app? What are the points where the user may choose to not go ahead with an order, right? Knowing the points that may cause a user to not go ahead with an order is important information, right? Because you can use that to change the experience where the user will decide to go ahead with the order, right? So tapping into the user's behavior through analytics and then later mining that to figure out, doing click stream analysis is really valuable. You can use that information. Who are the user's friends and what are they buying? I think part of the whole recommendation approach is knowing what other people are buying, that are like you, right? That's how you do recommendations. You like a certain set of things, and then you run an algorithm to kind of figure out who are the other users like you and what are they doing, and then using that to drive recommendations to you, right? Because that is how we determine that maybe what we're recommending is contextual to you. And then knowing who the user's friends are, building a social setting is part of that. And where is the user right now? This is location context. Where is he? Is he at home? Is he at work? Is he near a Walmart? Where whatever. So location is also, I think, a key aspect when it comes to this personalization predictive analytics. Location and friends, I think those are really key. And what are others like you are doing? So when it comes to building a solution like this, there's certain clustering algorithms that you can use to determine what are other users like him, as I said. And then you can determine what are they doing, right? And then they use that to drive some recommendation behavior. Is the user dissatisfied? Has it done a negative recommendation or negative review on one of your products, right? Because that is one way of converting the user, right? If you use that information to alert your customer service and then use that to convert a potentially lost user, right? So you can use all of this. What is the same about sharing on social media? There's a whole class of problems here, and this is called sentiment analysis, right? So how do you find the user's sentiment? How do you mine the user's sentiment through what he says? And then using what the user's saying on social media is another avenue for you to monetize and for you to give very smart recommendations. For example, we use the example, the user tweets, he wants to fly to Paris, right? The airline companies could use that information to give him an offer to say, hey, there's a cheap flight here to Paris, would you be interested in it? And because he's just tweeted that, highly likelihood that he will, right? He's obviously interested in that because That's what you just said. But being able to understand the user sentiment and to be able to target something specific to him, I mean, that is real powerful. Another patterns in user behavior, right? Is he vegetarian? Is he always ordering vegetarian? So you build a profile of him, right? He's a 35-year-old vegetarian with 2 kids, right? I know this sounds a little, prismy, right? The recent NSA things that have been coming up, but it's really important for business, right? For business, you need to know your customer. You need to know him intimately to be able to give proper recommendations that work. Here's a high-level solution for this problem, right? And right now, real estate, we have a lot of technology out there in the form of Amazon and cloud and open source projects that you can use to build this. It's not rocket science anymore, right? So I've included an API manager because the thinking API, so you want to be able to use this recommendation and personalization capability across all your different channels, right? So you have a stream of data from a mobile app that are going to an event queue. And this could be on Amazon SQS, or you can use Twitter with a storm. And then comes the actual personalization part where you run classification, clustering, algorithms to determine various attributes about this user. Identify similarity. Again, you can use Elastic MapReduce as Amazon, or you can do Hadoop. Again, Twitter Storm, and then you put that into a data store. This could be a NoSQL, like Dynamo, Cassandra, Mongo, and then you make that accessible back to the client through an API that gives you the user profile. He's a 35-year-old vegetarian male, or drive recommendations, right, based on other products that he's purchased as well as similar users. And for those out there who might be interested in this, you could do this as a service. You could offer this as a service. There's an avenue where you could make this into a very white label, reusable service where you can really offer this as a service to people who's interested. So, building smart objects, I don't know how to speed up a little bit. Along with the whole advent of Bluetooth, low energy, and hobbies platforms like the Raspberry Pi, there's been a storm of people building these smart connected objects. Smart objects are also known as the Internet of Things. Right? Cisco calls it the Internet of Everything. Right? Cisco has a much broader vision that they're much attractive in. They're expecting everything is going to be managed, which probably will be the case. That's why they want to be everything. And GM called the industrial internet, right? And then also the Internet of Nouns. And so all these systems are now, you have connectivity. So everybody's chatting, right? All the devices are chatting with each other. So data connectivity requirements are really exploding. There's lots of interesting use cases in telemedicine, logistics, manufacturing, where smart connected objects can really add value and kind of change the whole game, right? And also with this comes challenges, right? How do you secure this communication? How do you make sure that somebody hacking into your fridge, can find out that you're an alcoholic or whatever it is, right? So. It's a lot of security concerns involved. And how do you manage this infrastructure? Because there's a lot of things there's a lot of smart devices, and if you don't have a proper way of managing this, then that becomes an issue. So there's a lot of scope for doing this because this is still a very nascent, very early phase we are in with respect to this technology. The way I see it, wireless and Bluetooth low energy is going to be a key enabler for this. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. Now I get to key enabling technologies, Bluetooth and beacons. So when talking about Bluetooth, it's been there for more than 10 years, right? But really the low energy Bluetooth is really coming into the foreground these days, especially with regards to beacons and micro-location technology. And they're not, really is not backwards compatible with classic, but you have devices which are capable of running in dual mode, so it can be both LED as well as classic. You can do things like geofencing, peer-to-peer communication. Now, and it's very low energy consumption. So for example, you can have a small beacon with a small battery that lasts for 2 years without requiring the battery change. So I mean, it's really low energy requirements. This is what makes it practical, right? Because earlier the geofencing was an interesting idea and people used it, but it requires you to access GPS networks and wireless networks, causing battery drain, making it fairly cumbersome for the user. But now you have things like this, which makes it really affordable and also practical for them to use. It's also low cost, interoperable, and has good security. Some specifications here is available on Wikipedia. So based on this, you can see that really compared to classic Bluetooth, the low energy is built for low latency and low temperature connection and send data. Whereas it's 100 milliseconds on the classic side, it's 3 milliseconds on the low energy side to send data. And power consumption is a fraction. And peak current consumption is half. So it says here to chatty where you really can't use it for streaming data. So that is a challenge right now. And the actual bandwidth ODR rate is small. But when you're considering the kinds of use cases where you have health devices, your heart rate monitors and things like that, which just needs to periodically send the data out, it's not a problem. Compared to NFC, this is again some comparisons. The range is obviously a lot higher, right? And the setup time is also much shorter. Now I get to beacon technology. So this is a very interesting area right now, which I think is very disruptive because it has the potential to radically transform the user experience. Right? And there's lots of uses in retail, home automation, agriculture, fencing, all these things. So a beacon is simply a small device, probably around the size of this, right? And you see in the pictures here. What you see below is actually the PayPal beacon. And all they do, there's nothing fancy here. All they do is they transmit a certain broadcast signal on Bluetooth LED, which devices can pick up, and based on the identifier, determine where the beacon is actually located. Right? So it's simply that. It's a very simple concept, but it opens up a lot of avenues in terms of what you can do with it. Some examples are SD mode, PayPal beacon, and so on. This is rely on Wi-Fi and cellular networks, and it really has a one-to-many interaction with consumers. So it broadcasts, and many devices can pick up that signal and actually do work. So I want to actually do a demo of this. Does anybody is anybody running Android 4.3 on a fairly recent device? Android 4.3 and above? There's one. So if you can, and if you want to describe it a little bit, I hope the demo will work. Just go to the browser and just type that in. It will install an app which will gather a lot of interesting data about the device and send it to you. Version. Please enable Bluetooth as well. Enable your Bluetooth antenna. What I'm doing is actually it's an app that that uses a framework by various networks to actually Android app. So it listens to certain beacon signal, and I'm able to simulate that beacon signal using my iPad, even though I don't have a beacon, right? Because using an iPad, a device where you have access to the low energy, you can actually simulate that. And then it should pop up a message on your smiley on your app. It's a very simple use case. What I'll do is, while you guys get that out, I'll actually demonstrate it through this for the rest of you who have access to it. Alright, so I have my device where I've installed this app, right? So this is the app that I asked you to install. You did it. Once I enable the Bluetooth signal, so it picks it up, right? So this is simulating the device coming into the range of a beacon that is outputting that same signal. And you can take action based on it. So instead of showing the smiley, you could use it to check in that user. Because the app would know who the user is, and he would know the location, and it would automatically check in. This is exactly what happens with the PayPal email. It uses this information to check the user email. Now if I turn off the transmitter, it takes a little bit of time. But then you eventually find out that this guy is no longer within the vicinity of the beacon, and you're able to take some action based on that. Right? You can check these out, or you can do some location-specific functionality, right? Using that. I'll quickly show you from a code standpoint how this works. Right? It's actually very simple. I'm using a framework by various networks called the proximity kit. This is something quickly cobbled together, so don't think too much about the code in India. So essentially what we're talking about is we define a region, right? We define a region along with the region code. This is a GUI, this is a UI that we use to listen, right? And I'm using a null UI. This is transferring a null beacon, right? And then so there's obviously a bootstrap modifying interface for this, right? And here are the two callbacks. Very simple. Right? There's not a whole lot going on. Then you have activity where you actually bind this, right? There is particular bind events, right? Using ID can manage. And you can solve that. Essentially all you need, right? With all you need to do, you can get a UUID, the major and the minor, right? So proximity tells you how far away you are from the beacon, it's near or far or whatever. It gives you some kind of indication there. And the UUID tells you what chain of stores is this. This is Walmart, or this is Target, whatever, right? And the major and the minor tells you, okay, this is a particular store. Major tells you, okay, you're at New York City or whatever store of Walmart. And then minor, it says you are in the clothing section. next to the shoes, whatever. So that has to be looked up and determined to say, okay, you're here. And then based on that, you can give very targeted response. So, moving on. So the LED technology has been supported in Apple since 4S. So all devices since 4S you have this, right? And they're now coming up with this API support as well. And Android is a little late in the game, right? So they started with 4.2. They actually got a whole new stack. It's called BlueJoy, based on contribution by Broadcom. So on 4.3 they added the LED capability, so that's why you need at least Android 4.3 in order to do this scenario. And there's a whole bunch of manufacturers who popped up, folks like Eskimo and Viva, who gives you this really low cost $20 to $30 beacons that you can stick around the store and you can actually get this to work. They also have SDKs. And then frameworks like Proximity, which is what I use, also do the same thing. And it's not only an iOS thing, it's also available through Android. So you can create cross-platform apps and leverage this technology. Now I come to another section, which is roll your own iBeacon using a Raspberry Pi. Right? How many of you, I'm sure all of you, how many of you have used a Raspberry Pi or played around with it? I know what a Raspberry Pi is. I'm sure the rest also does that. So, in case you don't, this is one, right? It's a $35 piece of hardware, right? It's very low cost. It's got a Broadcom system on chip, right? So you can do a lot of things with this, right? And as I said earlier, the whole Internet of Things, phenomenon is actually spurred by this little device, because it makes hacking on do-it-yourself projects very much easier. If you go to a site called datafruit.com, you can see a lot of components, extensions, and things that you can use to sensors for a Raspberry Pi, so you can build really smart, intelligent systems, right? And it also uses an SD card which has a Linux operating system based on Debian called Raspbian, which basically compiles the ARM chipset. So it's a full-blown operating system. You're not working with it at a microcontroller level. So it's a lot easier. You can use your own languages like Python or Perl or even Java to actually build components for the Raspberry Pi. It also has GPIO input-output pins, general purpose input-output pins that you can use to control actuators and other external equipment, so you can actually automate your house, right? And this is what, home automation is a big thing now, based on there's a big Google acquired Nest for $1 billion. So think about it, it could be the next. So you can actually build a iBeacon using a Raspberry Pi. Of course, it's not as cheap as a Eskimo or a Gimbal, because that costs around only about $10 to $30, whereas this would be $35 off the store. Plus, you have to buy a USB module. So right now, it's more of a hobbyist exercise, right? Maybe not a cost-effective one. But if you have Raspberry Pis lying around, maybe that's a good investment. You can use them to build beacons and really try out this technology. One thing though, Google 4 USB module, I've not been able to find one in Sri Lanka, right? So I've scoured like everywhere, like in the plaza, so I couldn't find one. So one challenge you're going to have if you're going to do this is getting hold of a USB module, right? So, but it's going to be Bluetooth 4 though, because only Bluetooth 4 supports the LED, low energy. So you're going to need both of these. Plus, an app called iBeacon Toolkit app, which is able to see iBeacons around you, right? That is to verify whether it's working properly or not. And this is just an overview of what the Raspberry Pi is. Go check it out online. I think there's a wealth of material out there. So it comes with HDMI, Ethernet, TV out, USBs, and SD card slot. And then along with that, you have a whole bunch of extensions that you can do. The Model B comes to about 500 rupee a brand, and that's more than enough for using a pretty decent application. The alternative is there's also another small control called Arduino, which is also very popular, but it gets a little bit more low level than working with the Raspberry Pi. So this may be a better place to start off with if you're new to this kind of thing. So it's called a Pi beacon actually. And all it does is it transmits a single frame and uses the Bluetooth stack that is available on Raspberry. And hopefully whatever USB module that you select or buy will be compatible with that. You have to check that also to make sure it works. And so this frame is simply, as you can see, one is a constant and the number of bytes in the payload, which tells you, in this case, 21 bytes for the entire payload. And then you have 120-bit UID, which, as I said, identifies the chain of store for the organization. Right? You have the major and the minor that goes into the next level of detail to specifically identify which location you're coming from. Right? And then the TX power, which is what is the power strength of your signal. Right? So if you're doing something like battery power, you may want to be careful about that because it will drain your battery. Right? At the same time, it also extends your reach. So you have to balance that out depending on the type of use case you're trying to solve. And there's a link here, if you're interested in that gives you the complete details about how to build this step by step. Right? So it's just you go there. I'll put this up on SlideShare so that you can pick this up later. So in summary, really it is a really exciting time in terms of technology, in terms of what you can do, in terms of redefining user experience in multiple ways. And we're looking at several key things in the coming time in terms of interest. One is micro-location, we talked about, and analytics, and regional analytics, and personalization, and then payment, how they can run things. And the focus is shifting towards using omnichannel solutions that I talked about. It takes a more of an API-centric approach. Right? This is spurred by a whole slew of technologies for low cost, low power communication, right? And capable devices like this, which lets you implement cool use cases. So there's lots of uncharted territory, but at the same time, there's lots of challenges. But that all means opportunity. One thing I forgot to mention is the PayPal beacon technology. I want to get back to that, having involved in this exercise. So how that typically works is, when you enter an established PayPal beacon is like you saw in my photograph earlier, something you plug into the mouse slot, and that's what the normal beacon does. But the beacon signal is integrated by the PayPal app. Typically, when you go to a location and you check in, right? You become a customer of a certain establishment. You go to Starbucks and you check in, the person behind the counter knows that you checked in, right? So he knows Anuradha Weeraman has just checked into Starbucks, right? And but here, by using this technology, you can check in automatically without having to take your phone off or whatever. Which is how, in the scenario I described earlier, the phone vibrated and let Jane know that she checked into a coffee shop, right? Using this technology. And then, based on the app can also, if you configure your preferences, to say, between 8 or 10, if I go to this store, order the breakfast meal, or this coffee, and this whatever. So the app knows, hey, this is my preferences, and once you check in, you can automatically place that order, right? And then once all is complete, the barista or the person on the counter all has to just call out the person's name who has just checked in, and then payment happens behind the scenes for the case of PayPal. All I need to say is, put it on my name, or and then the payment takes place. So it's a completely cashless experience, completely driven by use case as opposed to technology, right? So it takes a technology away and lets you live your life, and technology just enables it and makes it easier. Right? So lots of interesting times, lots of opportunity there. I think that's about it for my, as part of my presentation. I can open up for questions. Okay. I actually have one more session. How many of you have used the Sri Lankan Airlines mobile app? See one. Anybody else? Okay. So Sri Lankan Airlines mobile app was built by Virtusa in my group, and it's recently been received an award for user experience by App Store Data. We're using App Store Data using cross-platform technology. And I have Apsara Singh, who's the architect of that project here, and talk a little bit about her experience.
Will everyone enjoy it? So, can everyone hear me? So, as Anu said, what I want to share with you all today is a very brief presentation on case study of one of the and why I want to share this with you all is to discuss on and if you ever come across something like that, you can take something to use from what we have gone through. Actually also, I want to touch upon some of the aspects Anu has also focused on, like how to use the best practices to work using, and also it's like creativity. So before going directly to the characters, we need to explain about the background of the thing. Now, we got this project proposal about 1 year back, and what the client wanted is particular to that first 10 years. Basically, they want to travel back for major mobile platform. It's Virtusa experience. That's all they say. So, to really translate that sentence into requirements, you will see that there are several things. So, the thing is that they want a cross-platform mobile application. That's one thing they say. And they want to support multiple. Basically, they want a universal. They want to support iPhone, iPad, tablet, and everything. So, our challenge was to first build a universal mobile application. And then they say they want a native user experience. So they don't want a well-optimized website or anything like that. They just want to provide application which can be downloaded from the App Store. So that's their suggestion. And they say it's a minimum time market. So they given us like 4 months to give us this. And then the key thing that they want to support multiple sources. Basically, this travel application is a marketing application for their back-end business process. Like for example, live sharing, live streams, feedback. So, to gather those information and to perform those business functionalities, we have to talk to several back-end systems. So, we should. Our requirement was to build an application which supports all of those backend systems. And one day they decide to build the backend system, the user should not feel it. Like user experience should not be disrupted. It should be a seamless experience. So those were the main requirements we got from them. So the first challenge, I want to talk about the first challenge is the future right development. I believe this is one of the challenges any of them face if you are building because there are so many technologies and technologies out there which can be with every time. So I'm sure many of you would agree that naming is the best way to compare it. Think about the user experience, the ability to access the native features, performance, everything. But you have to keep in mind that it's very specialized skill. You need a very specialized skill to build the native. So in this case, maybe this was not the option for us because now even though we built this application, one day American Airlines is going to make it. And their IT system did not have that specialist skill. So we have to start that over. Then they have the web applications. It is quite any web developer can do. So technology is not an issue there. But there are certain disadvantages there. So the American Airlines, you can remember, specifically say they want a native system. Native application. So, using web application was again not an option for us. So, only option with respect to us is to go with a hybrid development. And we have actually analyzed several hybrid applications, like a accelerated, like a phone gap, etc. And we have decided to go with Titanium accelerator. As anyone, I'm sure most of you must have heard of Titanium accelerator. One of the reasons why we are going with that is basically one thing is the technology, it's JavaScript based. So any developer, the learning curve is pretty small and any web developer can easily adapt. Then because of that, the maintenance cost and cost of ownership is less. And also, even unlike web applications, actually provide the access to the native features of the phone. That you can access the camera and the location and all. So, the technology we have selected is accelerated. And that was how we have overcome our first step. That is to find the correct development. And I will quickly explain a little bit more about Titanium and why we have gone with that rather than going to say, for example, so one of the main things about the accelerator is the sudden point accelerator. That's a native system. So take other hybrid applications like Syntax and Codecap. And even though they are also based in JavaScript, just like Titanium. Codecap and Syntax, everything provide a web lookup. It does not provide anything. But what Titanium does is, even though it's based on JavaScript, they are interpreting the JavaScript and create a native UI. So under the hood, they are actually converting the JavaScript symbols to the native symbols. So it's as good as, almost as good as development of native application. That is one of the main considerations why they have done that. And as I listed out here, there are other advantages also. Very easy to develop. People who have actually used this would know. It's quite easy to learn and they have comprehensive and very large scale. And also all the other features you would find in hybrid development. And here I will just explain some of the best practices we have followed. So whoever, as I said earlier, whoever comes to something like this, get some ideas and it will be fun. So the first thing is that our architecture is that we have to maximize the code reusage because it's a post-factual application and you have to actually start at 80% from the code you get approximately. That is how we use the data, the time to market period drastically decrease. So to achieve that, what we have done is that we have designed layered architecture. Even though it's a pattern application, we have designed layered architecture where you separate out the business layer from the presentation. So the presentation layer, you can actually provide the platform related features, but you can use the business one. And in order to do that, we have to follow the command-based specification. take a user, he would understand the business logic behind it. So you have to express in a way that understand that the user can understand. You should not need to know the business logic behind, say for example, chip. It should be very intuitive, and you should be able to quickly identify what the functionality is. So we have actually focused on those types of design, and these are some of the screens we have designed. If you take the first set of screens, there's a card-based display of their price numbers. And also some of the things like see layout, QR code. Here what we have done is we have used the most effective text and graphics, providing the best user experience. Because screen real estate is limited, and keep in mind it's a universal app, so we don't have much flexibility to play around. We have to keep in mind that we have to get for so many more items. So we try to use the best, most effective text and graphics. And then also we try to optimize the menu. That's basically Ultra using hybrid development platform. One of the downside is that your application would be little big than a native application. That is because they will most probably bundle third-party engines like JavaScript engine, so that they can separate certain like JavaScript dynamic and front. So because of that, we have been very mindful of using the graphics. And you have to always optimize the thing. So that's one of the best practices we have followed. And third thing is that we have actually used the test-driven development. I know most of us developers think that testing is stupid or something. But it is critical when you are in the universal lab that you actually test your application profile, because your business components are going to be used across. So, how we achieve that is to do a comprehensive application testing, not only the functional testing, we actually test the and have done the user testing with the actual user for this. That way, we make sure that our design, user interface design is catered for one thing. Then security testing, performance testing, battery life testing. For all of these, we have used the latest technology available in Android. This is the export app for and monkey automation we can use to provide. So these were three things we have followed from the basics to third one, as I said at the start, that they have this requirement of support for different backend systems, and they want the flexibility to change the backend system whenever they want without interrupting the user experience. You should not be forced to install the latest version of the application just because they are not changing their backend system. So we had to ensure that we will follow the layer, like how we manipulate this, as Anu said, to the API management. We have introduced the middle layer, basically a framework, which exposes the APIs and separates them. And that's separate data access layer from backend systems. So that whenever they wanted to change one of these backend systems, they just have to change data access layer. But the APIs won't change, and which ensure that client doesn't have to install the latest application just because of that application. Okay, so that is how we ensure seamless usage. So those are the three main challenges we face: finding the right technology, finding the right design, and ensuring that even though the business will scale, the user's experience is not disrupted. So conclusion, what I want to tell you all is that if you ever come across a situation where you have to really approach platform, find the right approach. That is, there's no actual right or wrong approach. It depends on your requirement. So make sure you optimize development and speed by accurately identifying platform challenges. Also, make sure that you are consistent and reliable. So that your time to market and total cost of ownership is reduced.
TGIT. Gayan had been here. Gihan too. Ashan? How come I never get invited to these things? I'm missing out on so much. I have lost people. Hello, Gayan. I was looking at your pictures at the TGIT event that you went to. How can I never get invited to these kind of things? You know I like to come to these IT related things. Is it alert SMS? Tell me more about that. So you get an SMS whenever something IT related happening in Colombo? Huh. I'm gonna try that out. Okay, thank you. REG space DIGIT. Let's see how this works. Huh. Register.
I think our presenters put in a lot of effort to come up with this session. Thanks again, Anuradha. Please record your feedback on the feedback forms. In particular, specify if there is something that you would like us to add for future sessions. If there's any particular area of technology that you would like us to cover, because we plan to continue with this series of mobile developer boot camps as well. I would like to thank Virtusa for providing the refreshment as well as the refreshment. Those of you who making heavy refreshments, please go ahead and do so on the event. Also SLASSCOM, who helped organize this event, as well as Digit, who are our online media partners. And thanks a lot for attending. Please keep in touch. Make sure your names are with us. If you haven't registered for the event, and we'll keep you posted on all future events and happenings as well. Thanks a lot for attending. Cheers. There's a quick presentation that Imran Turkan, who is the director of SLASSCOM, will make.
Thank you.